Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Forensics for Dummies, 2nd edition, by D.P. Lyle, M.D., narrated by Chris Sorensen. Publisher's note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to figures present in the print and e-book formats of the book. Limit of liability, disclaimer of warranty. The publisher and the author make no representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy or completeness of the contents of this work, and specifically disclaim all warranties, including without limitation warranties of fitness for a particular purpose. No warranty may be created or extended by sales or promotional materials. The advice and strategies contained herein may not be suitable for every situation. This work is sold with the understanding that the publisher is not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If professional assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. Neither the publisher nor the author shall be liable for damages arising herefrom. The fact that an organization or website is referred to in this work as a citation and/or a potential source of further information does not mean that the author or the publisher endorses the information the organization or website may provide or recommendations it may make. Further, listeners should be aware that Internet websites listed in this work may have changed or disappeared between when this work was written and when it is heard. The Introduction. You probably purchased Forensics for Dummies 2nd edition because you're fascinated by the marriage of criminal justice and science. I wrote this book because I have a similar fascination. And you and I are not alone. Shows such as CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, CSI Miami, and NCIS have dominated network television ratings for many years, attesting to the fact that millions of people agree that forensics is an interesting subject. Every criminal investigation you see on the news or read about in the newspaper, it seems, hinges on some bit of forensic evidence. This book is designed to give you an understanding of the techniques and procedures used by forensic scientists. The next time you read or view a mystery story or hear a news report about a crime, you can turn to this book for the science underlying the story. About this book. Forensics for Dummies 2nd edition is an introduction to the field of forensic science, covering a broad range of forensic topics in a clear and concise fashion. I explain these often complex principles in plain English so that listeners at all levels can gain a better understanding of forensic science. The book includes many examples of how these techniques are applied in real-life situations. In addition, I include case studies throughout the book to illustrate how forensic science has been used to solve famous cases. If you know absolutely nothing about forensics, this book is an excellent starting point. If you're familiar with many forensic topics, this book serves to refresh and expand your knowledge. Note: the conventional language used by scientists is foreign to most people, so I hold scientific jargon to a minimum in this book. Still, as with other areas of science, the study of forensics can be dry and boring at times. To avoid painting such an arid landscape, I added practical examples of how each technique works, and I included many famous cases that relied on forensic science for their solutions. I also threw in a little humor to liven things up a bit. If my humor falls flat, remember, I'm a physician, not a stand-up comedian. Foolish assumptions. As I wrote this book, I made some assumptions about you and what your needs may be, including: you have an interest in forensic science, you're a fan of the many forensic science shows that are aired on both network and cable television, you avidly follow criminal cases reported on TV and in newspapers, you're considering a career in forensic science, you love reading mysteries and want to better understand the science behind the stories, you're simply curious by nature. Icons used in this book. Like other For Dummies books, this one has icons to guide you through the information and help you zero in on what you want to know. The following describes the icons and what they mean. A closer look. This icon indicates that I'm giving you a look behind the scenes of a forensic practice or area of investigation. I use it to point out in-depth discussions of these concepts. Case study. I use many real-life stories to illustrate the points in this book. This icon sets off these tales of crimes past. Tip. Sometimes, to give you a clearer picture of how a forensic practice came about, I provide the historical background or a note about a related instance from long ago. Remember. I flag certain pieces of information with this icon to let you know something is particularly worth keeping in mind. Strange but true. Forensics deals with plenty of mind-blowing information about such things as the human body, evidence, and crime itself. For those of you who want just the juicy facts, look for this icon. Technical stuff. This icon signals that I'm going to delve a little deeper than usual into a scientific or medical explanation. I don't mean to suggest the information is too difficult to understand, just a little more detailed. Beyond the book. This book is bursting with content, but you can go online and find even more. Check out the book's cheat sheet at dummies.com/cheat-sheet/forensics for tips on what to do if you witness a crime, tools of the trade in crime scene investigation, and more. And you can find some handy bonus articles related to forensics at dummies.com/extras/forensics. Where to go from here? Forensics is a broad and diverse field that involves many areas of science and criminal investigation. In this book, you can find out about many, but not all of its concerns. You may use this book as a reference and as a springboard for further investigation. The next time you see a news report, read a mystery novel, or watch a movie involving a crime, you can turn to this book to obtain a better understanding of the science behind the story. Part 1. Cracking Open the Case. In this part, discover how forensic science works. Find out who makes up the forensics team and what they do. Figure out how to properly collect and protect evidence at a crime scene. Understand the inner workings of a criminal mind. Chapter 1. Understanding the world of forensic science. In this chapter, defining forensic science and checking out its origins, understanding why the principle of evidence exchange is important, unveiling how forensic science is organized, revealing what services a crime lab offers. Turn on the TV any night of the week, and you'll find crime scene investigators or criminalists tracking down criminals, crime lab technicians evaluating evidence, and even forensic pathologists conducting autopsies on shows detailing cases real or imagined. I don't think this newfound interest in all things forensic stems from some macabre fascination with death or a guilty enchantment with the criminal world. If you ask me, people simply are curious by nature and have a strong appetite for scientific knowledge. Remember everyone's fascination with the space program not too many years ago? The cool tools and magical feats of forensic science, such as making fingerprints appear from nowhere, identifying suspects by their shoe prints, sniffing out a forger by the unique signature of a laser printer, and finding even the most obscure poisons are proving equally fascinating. In this chapter, you get your feet wet with the basic definitions and organizational elements of the field of forensic science. Most of the topics that I touch on here are explored further in the chapters that follow. Defining forensics: the science of catching criminals. If you lived in ancient Rome, you'd head to the Forum when you wanted to discuss the news of the day. The town forum was a community meeting place for merchants, politicians, scholars, and citizens that doubled as a center for public justice. Steal your neighbor's toga, and the case would be tried at the forum. Remember, the term forensic stems from the Latin word forum and applies to anything that relates to law. Forensic science, or criminalistics, is the application of scientific disciplines to the law. The same tools and principles that drive scientific research in universities and identify cures in hospitals are used by forensic scientists to reveal how a victim died and, ideally, who was responsible. In the same way, modern hospital laboratories employ professionals to deal with pathology, the study of diseases of the human body, toxicology, the study of drugs and poisons, and serology, the study of blood. Modern forensic laboratories employ experts in forensic pathology, forensic toxicology, and forensic serology, all of whom use the principles and testing procedures of their medical specialties to help resolve legal issues and answer questions like: when and how did the victim die? Does the suspect's blood match the blood found at the crime scene? Was a suspect's unusual behavior caused by drug use? Integrating science into the practice of law. Not long ago, identifying, capturing, and convicting criminals depended primarily upon eyewitnesses and confessions. The world was smaller, communities more closely knit, and the extent of travel basically only as far as you could walk. Whenever anyone witnessed a crime, he likely knew the perpetrator. Case closed. Trains, planes, and automobiles changed all that. Criminals can now rapidly travel far and wide, and with this newfound mobility, they are less and less likely to be recognized by an eyewitness. Besides, eyewitness evidence these days frequently is proven to be unreliable. For law enforcement to keep pace with these changes, other techniques for identifying criminals had to be developed. Science came to the rescue with methods that depend less on eyewitnesses to identify perpetrators, or at least link them to their victims or crime scenes. Fingerprinting, Chapter 5, Firearms Identification and Gunshot Residue Analysis, Chapter 18, Hair and Fiber Studies, Chapter 17, Blood Typing, Chapter 14, DNA Analysis, Chapter 15, and many other scientific techniques now help solve crimes that would have remained unsolved in the past. The marriage of science and law hasn't been without its setbacks. Many scientific breakthroughs are viewed with suspicion, if not downright hostility, until they become widely accepted. And before a science can ever enter the courtroom, it must be widely accepted. It should come as no surprise that before forensic science could develop, science in general had to reach a certain level of maturity. Drawing from other sciences. A closer look. The development of modern forensic science parallels general advancements in science, particularly the physical and biological sciences. Take a look at how few milestones in science pushed forensic science several steps forward. The invention of the microscope enabled criminalists to analyze even the smallest bits of evidence and to see details in evidence that never before were imagined. The development of photography gave criminalists a crystal-clear representation of the crime scene without relying on memory or the slow process, and far less detailed results, of making drawings. The understanding of the physics of ballistic trajectories gave criminalists a much clearer idea of where a bullet may have come from, which in turn made crime scene reconstruction more accurate. The discovery of blood typing and DNA analysis made matching suspect to crime scene far more exact. The expansion of our knowledge in basic chemistry allowed scientists to identify chemicals and poisons, particularly arsenic, and led to the development of forensic toxicology. Getting the big picture. Forensic science in action. You witness a burglar sneaking away from a store late at night. You call the police, and when they arrive, you identify the thief as someone you know. That person is arrested. However, fingerprints from the store's broken window, cracked safe, and tools used to open the safe don't match those of the person you've identified. Instead, they match the fingerprints of a known safecracker. What do you think police, prosecutors, and, more importantly, the jury are going to believe? After all, it was dark and raining, you were 100 feet away, you caught only a glimpse of the thief, and you'd just left a bar where you'd had a couple of drinks with friends. The fingerprints, on the other hand, match those of a known thief in each and every detail, meaning they came from him and only him. Which bit of evidence, the fingerprints or your eyewitness account, is more reliable? This scenario represents what forensic science does, or at least attempts to do. Each and every forensic technique that you discover in this book is designed to either identify perpetrators or connect them to the crime. Starting out small. Basic forensic services. Properly identifying, collecting, documenting, and storing evidence are at the heart of the forensic services offered by virtually all law enforcement agencies, from village cops to major metropolitan police departments. They need the basic services in the list that follows to be able to investigate and solve crimes and to convict the criminals who commit them. Evidence Collection Unit. This crime scene investigation unit collects and preserves evidence from the crime scene and transports it to the lab. Regardless of whether they're individual police officers or highly trained professionals, members of this unit expose and lift latent fingerprints, Chapter 5, collect hair and fibers, Chapter 3, and gather any other articles of evidence at the scene. Photography Unit. The photography unit takes pictures of the crime scene, all evidence, and the body whenever one is present. These photos are crucial, serving as blueprints for crime scene reconstruction and an excellent format for presenting evidence in the courtroom. Go to Chapter 3 to find out more about photographing a crime scene. Evidence storage. A secure place for storing and preserving the evidence is essential. Evidence usually is stored in a locked room with restricted access that is housed at your local police station or sheriff's department. Evidentiary materials are kept in storage for years or even decades, and the chain of custody must remain unbroken throughout that time, or the evidence can be compromised, losing its value. Looking at physical forensic science. Tracking down trace evidence, checking the characteristics of bullets fired from a gun, examining the penmanship of a signature on an important document, and evaluating the swirling ridges of fingerprints under a microscope are all part of the physical side of forensic science. Trace evidence. Any small item of evidence, such as hair, fiber, paint, glass, or soil, for example, that places the subject at the scene of the crime or in direct contact with the victim is considered trace evidence. Matching glass fragments found on the victim of a hit-and-run motor vehicle accident to glass from the broken headlamp of the suspect's car is a prime example. Find out more in Chapter 17. Firearms examination. Firearms examination deals with the identification of weapons and the projectiles they fire, including ammunition, fired bullets, shell casings, and shotgun shells. Firearms experts use a microscope and various types of chemical analysis to identify the type of weapon used to commit a crime and match any bullets fired from that weapon or shell casings to a suspect weapon. I cover firearms examination in Chapter 18. Document examination. Whenever an important written document's age or authenticity is in doubt, a document examiner uses handwriting analysis to match handwriting samples to questioned documents or signatures. Document examination also may include analyzing the physical and chemical properties of papers and inks, or exposing indented writing, the impressions made on the page beneath one that was written on. Typewritten or photocopied documents that may have been altered also fall under the document examiner's area of expertise. Check out Chapter 19 for the details. Fingerprint examination. Fingerprint examiners match prints to the fingers, palms, or soles of the people who left them at the crime scene. A print found at a crime scene can be compared with another taken from a database or from a suspect, victim, or bystander. Chapter 5 tells you all about fingerprint examination. Delving into biological forensic science. Forensic science deals not only with physical evidence, but also with biological evidence, which may take the form of a corpse, skeletal remains, drugs and poisons, teeth, bite marks, insects, and plant materials, to name a few. It also includes analysis of the criminal mind. Biological evidence is often what makes or breaks a case. For example, an autopsy, post-mortem examination of the body, which is discussed in Chapter 9, may reveal the nature and cause of any injuries, the presence of any poisons, and ultimately why and how the victim died. These findings alone may lead to the perpetrator. Blood and DNA analysis can positively identify suspects and link them to crimes. DNA and dental pattern records can be used to identify an unidentified corpse, and plant and insect evidence can reveal the time of death and link a suspect to the crime scene. Find out more about these sciences and the people who specialize in them in Chapter 2. Investigating the crime lab. Although they use much of the same equipment and follow similar research procedures, forensics, crime labs are quite different from medical, clinical labs. The latter deal with the living by carrying out testing aimed at diagnosing and treating the sick. On the other hand, forensics labs are geared toward testing evidence with the hope of establishing links between a suspect and a crime. Creating the first crime lab. Tip: the United States' first forensic laboratory was established in 1923 by August Vollmer in the Los Angeles Police Department. Shortly thereafter, the first private forensic lab was created in Chicago in 1929 as a result of the investigation of Chicago's infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. This case involved the expertise of Calvin Goddard, then America's leading firearms identification expert, who was able to link the killings to Al Scarface Capone. Two businessmen who served on the coroner's inquest jury were so impressed with Goddard and his scientific use of firearms identification that they funded the development of a crime lab at Northwestern University. The lab brought together the disciplines of firearms examination, blood analysis, fingerprinting, and trace evidence analysis, and served as a prototype for other labs. In 1932, Goddard helped the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, establish a national forensics laboratory that offered virtually every forensic service known to law enforcement across the United States. It too served as a model for future state and local labs. Now many states have networks of regional and local labs that support law enforcement at all levels. Case Study: the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. During the height of Prohibition, gang warfare raged over control of the illegal alcohol trade that sprang up in many U.S. cities. None was bloodier than the war between Chicago rivals Al Scarface Capone and George Bugs Moran. On the night of February 14, 1929, 7 of Moran's men were waiting for a shipment of hijacked liquor in a warehouse on Chicago's Clark Street. Unbeknownst to them, the shipment was a setup orchestrated by Capone in an attempt to kill his chief rival, Bugs Moran. Moran was supposed to be at the warehouse, but he arrived late. When he got there, he saw a police car pull up and 5 officers enter the warehouse. Moran retreated and heard machine gun fire, then saw 5 cops come out and drive away. The real police arrived and found that each of the 7 men had been shot numerous times. They recovered 70 shell casings. Bullets later were recovered from the victims. Cardiologist Dr. Calvin Goddard, who became famous during the Sacco and Vanzetti case, was called in because of his expertise in firearms investigation. He determined that the shell casings were from Thompson machine guns. Using the newly developed comparison microscope, he tested casings from Thompsons belonging to police and determined that none of them were the murder weapons. Goddard's findings meant that the killers had impersonated police officers. Suspicion fell on Capone. Police raided the home of one of Capone's hitmen, finding 2 Thompsons that later were identified as 2 of the murder weapons. Identifying common procedures. Scientific services offered by modern crime labs and medical examiners' offices are varied and complex. The number of services supplied by a particular laboratory depends on its size and budget. State and regional labs may provide a wide array of services, whereas local labs may provide only basic testing. These smaller labs typically outsource more sophisticated testing to larger regional labs. In addition, the FBI's National Crime Lab offers services to law enforcement throughout the country.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?